Hello Duelist, welcome back to the channel. On today's video I want to discuss a card that is seeing a lot of more play in the competitive scene, and that card is Small World. This card is very complicated in its release and it confused a lot of people, and it has even made some programs people to enjoy of making puzzles with it. It's quite funny. I want to show how to use Small World in the Sword Soul Tenyi Synchro deck. This is mostly the Tenyi Synchro deck, not the pure Sword Soul deck, but you still play all these Sword Soul monsters in it. But yeah, I want to show you the lines of how you can get from certain cards to other certain cards, because you need to know how to be able to start from point A and then be able to get to point C without banishing certain cards in your deck that are main combo pieces, right? So I'm going to show you how to do that today, and overall I hope you guys enjoyed the video, hope you learned something, and yeah, to start this video we need to understand how Small World works. So I'm going to have the text pulled up here. It is reveal one monster in your hand. Choose one monster from your deck that is exactly one of the same type, attribute, level, attack, or defense, and banish the reveal monster from your hand face down. Then add from your deck to your hand one monster that has exactly one of the same type, attribute, level, attack, or defense as the same monster chosen from your deck, and banish the card chosen from your deck face down. You can only activate one Small World per turn. Now, that might seem confusion, but it's actually way more simple than it actually seems, and I'm going to show you as we go into the video. So we're going to show you the average monsters that you play in the Sword Souls Tenyi Synchro deck, and then I can show you how to get from card to card if you need to get to a certain combo piece. So let's get into it. Okay, so as you can see here, I have all of the average cards that you would play in a Tenyi Sword Soul Synchro deck. This is just about everything, and as you can see, we have the Small World right here. So we have the one copy of Moye, Deskbot, Rocks Rose Dragon, Red Rose Dragon, Ashuna, the Water Enchantress, Griffin Rider, Long Young, Vishuda, Adhara, Ghost Ogre, Ash Blossom, Ghost Bell, Nibiru, Effect Veiler, and Tenyi. This is all pretty average as things that I'm playing. You could also incorporate things like Cypher Gear Gamma, Droll and Lockbird, Artifact Lancia. There's a bunch of other cards you can include, but this is, like, I would say, the basis generalization of it. And now you have to, when you're playing the deck, you have to know what cards you want to be searching with Small World. And the three cards that you want to be searching for in this specific deck is these three right here. I have them pulled aside together. These are your main combo pieces, your main engine pieces, and this is what you want to be able to get to. So for Small World in particular, if you open up this card, you want to be getting to these three cards in this deck. Now, so I'm going to pull these three aside for now and put them down here. So this is going to be point C. That's what I will call this, because you have a point A that you have to banish from hand, B that you have to banish from deck, and then C which you want to get to. So these are going to be your point Cs. This is really important to keep in mind because you want to be able to always have access to these cards. And then you also have to think in your mind what you don't want to banish with Small World, because they might only be one-ofs in your deck. Things like Rocks Rose Dragons is a one-of that you want to summon off the Red Rose. Things like Despot 001 is a monster that you want to summon off of the Christian Hockey Fibrax for the combo. And then things like maybe Long Young and Tenyi that you might be playing one-ofs that are a part of your combo that make your end board. So I would say these four are probably the most important ones that you do not want to banish off Small World. You can use them if you're playing multiples, but obviously you can banish them if you have to, but it is something that I do not recommend needing to banish if you do not have to. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the things that we would like to ideally see in point A, because that is the best things to start with. So ideally what you probably want in point A is hand traps, because you're going first, right? If you're going first, you want to banish a hand trap, so you're not going to need it because you want to make your end board and start your combos. So hand traps are pretty much technically dead on your first turn, so I'm going to start with these. So we're going to go right across the board, and then we can just see how we get to the point Cs. So from something like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit down here. Okay, so we're going to start with Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, and we are going to try to get to Rocks Rose, Ashuna, and Water Enchantress at the Temple. So to start with Rocks Rose Dragons, we can banish the Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Then we can banish the Water Enchantress of the Temple, because they only share level 3 in common. Everything else about the card is different. They have different attributes, different types, different attack, different defense. They only share at the level. So you can banish the Water Enchantress from your deck face down, and banish this from your hand face down, and then you'd be able to add the Red Rose Dragon. So what this does is this facilitates from Ghost Ogre to banish multiple copies. You play multiple copies of Water Enchantress, I would be assuming, to get to Red Rose Dragon. So that's a way to start there. Now, something that's important to remember is just because you have this line, that does not mean that you have this line. And the reason you don't have this line is because Ghost Ogre has and Red Rose have the same defense as well as the same level. So these two do not work, but you can have them over here because they're not A and C do not have to have only one thing in common, only from point B. So this is just a perfect example of clearing it up to make it easier for you guys to understand. They only have one thing in common, and that is the level. Everything else about these cards is different from point A to B, and then from B to C, one thing is different. Okay, so now I'm going to try to go a little bit faster and explain it less to you guys. I'm just going to say what you can do and not just explain why you can do it. So like I said, from Ghost Ogre, that's how you get to Red Rose Dragon. Now let's say you want to be able to get to Water Enchantress. This would be where your Sword Soul Moyi comes up. You can go from Ghost Ogre to Moyi to Water Enchantress. To get to Ashuna, you can go Ghost Ogre to Adhara to Ashuna. Next up, we're going to do Ash Blossom, Water Enchantress, Red Rose, Ash Blossom, Moyi, Water Enchantress. Also, for this specific one, if you choose not to play Moyi, you can also go Ash Blossom into Effect Veiler into Water Enchantress, something to keep in mind. And Ashuna, you can go Ash Blossom into Effect Veiler again into Ashuna. You can also go Ash Blossom into Adhara into Ashuna. So that's it for Ash Blossom. Next up, we have Ghost Spell. We can go Ghost Spell into Water Enchantress into Rose Dragon, Ghost Spell into Effect Veiler into Water Enchantress. You can also go Ghost Spell into Moyi into Water Enchantress. Now this is, again, you have to keep in mind of some of these things. You cannot go Ghost Spell Adhara into Ashuna because they are both Earth and 0 attacks. So every specific monster has a little different interaction that you have to keep in mind. But you can go Ghost Spell into Effect Veiler into Ashuna. That is completely fine. Nibiru is the hardest one, I will say. This is the most awkward monster in your deck just because it is the rock and level 11, I believe it is so hard to be able to match something. So there were some specific instances in this where you're playing, if you're playing a different monster, this can come up. So to go from Nibiru to Red Rose, you actually just cannot do it in this deck. You cannot go Nibiru into Red Rose in these monsters specifically. But what you can do, if you do play Psyframe Gear Gamma, Gamma can be your B, and then you can get to Red Rose because Gamma has 1000 attack and it's a light monster and they share nothing else in common. So you can do that if you choose to play Psyframe Gear Gamma. To go from Nib into Ashuna, you can go Effect Veiler again because they are both light monsters. So you can do this to get to Ashuna. To go from Nib to Water Enchantress, you can use Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit to be able to get there. You have Effect Veiler. If you want to get to Red Rose Dragon, you can go Effect Veiler into either Ash or Ghost Spell to then get into Red Rose Dragon because these two share, these and this share 1800 defense while these share 0 attack. So for Effect Veiler, you go Effect Veiler into Water Enchantress into Red Rose Dragon, and this allows you to share because they have level 3 and these are spellcasters. To get into Water Enchantress, you can banish Ash or Bell. To get into Ashuna, you can banish Nibiru the Primal Being to then get into the Tenyi Spirit Ashuna. And next up we have the Tenyi monsters themselves and the Griffin Rider, and we also have the Water Enchantress and the original starters that we can use. So again, just keep in mind these are your C's, but you want to be able to start from anywhere to get to anywhere for the most part. So we're going to start with Adhara for this one. So for Adhara, to get to Red Rose Dragon, you can actually banish Vashuda because they are both worms and they have nothing else in common besides being worms. And then these two are both dark and they have nothing else in common besides being dark. So that's how you get from Adhara to Red Rose. Now to get to Adhara to Ashuna, you actually cannot banish Vashuda because they're both level 7 worms, but you can banish hand traps, something like Ghost Ogre. You can go from Adhara to Ghost Ogre because they are both 0 attack, and then you can go from Ghost Ogre to Ashuna because they are both light monsters. And lastly, to get to Water Enchantress, you can go from Adhara to Ghost Ogre because again they have 0 attack and then everything else is different. And then you can go to Ghost Ogre to Water Enchantress just because they're both level 3 monsters. This also does apply to Ash Blossom and Ghost Spell as well. All of these work to getting to Water Enchantress on Adhara. Now we'll do Vashuda. So to go from Vashuda to Red Rose Dragon, you can actually banish Moye here. These share that they are only worm monsters, and these share that they are 1800 defense. To get to the Water Enchantress, you can go from Vashuda to Red Rose to Water Enchantress. These share that they are dark, and these two share that they are level 3s, and there is nothing else in common with them. To get from Vashuda to Ashuna, you can just banish the Adhara because the level of this is level 1, and these two share worm and level 7s. So this only shares that it's a worm, and then this only shares that it's a worm. To get from Ashuna, let's say you open up multiples, to go from Ashuna to Red Rose, you can banish Moye. So Ashuna to Moye to Red Rose. These share that they are only worm monsters and nothing else, and these share that they have 1800 defense and nothing else. To get from Ashuna to Water Enchantress, you could do Moye again, because again, they're water now, rather than being 1800 defense, it's about being water. Or you could do something like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, because these are light monsters, and then these are level 3, and they have nothing else in common. Now to get to Water Enchantress, to Ashuna, you can use the same exact things. So these two are reversible, as long as the middle is the same, right? So Water Enchantress to something in the middle, to Ashuna, still works completely fine, only one similarity. That also applies to the Red Rose line. I'm going from Water Enchantress to Moye to Red Rose, the exact same thing. And then if you banish Wandering Griffin Rider, if you want to get to Red Rose Dragon, you can banish the Vishuda from your hand. These share that they are level 7, and these share that they are dark. From Griffin Rider to Ashuna, this is where you might have to get a little bit creative. This is where something like Tenyi will come in, because you need a wind monster. So for this, you have a level 7 and a level 4, but they are wind, and they have nothing else in common. And then to get from here to here, these share no stats similar besides being worm monsters. That's what you get from Griffin Rider to Ashuna. And then to get to from Griffin Rider to Water Enchantress, you can actually go Griffin Rider into Vishuda, because they're both level 7 monsters, that's all they have in common. But Water Enchantress and Vishuda actually both have 1500 attack, and these actually do work together very well for Small World. So that was pretty much every monster in this deck that you can use to get to Red Rose Dragon, Ashuna, and the Water Enchantress. There's also some other lines you can take. Some of them do use Long Young if you want to play multiple Long Young, or if you just rather search Blackout at the end of your combo. But that is pretty much every line you can possibly take with the Small World lines. So I hope you guys learned something today. I know this card's very complicated and it's very annoying to find the lines for this card, but you really got to sit down and just like look at your deck, look at every different monster you play, and just try your best to figure it out. So I hope you guys enjoyed, hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.